This is another archival upload of some of my previous mix critique videos. I apologize for the vertical format that this video is about to switch to. This is 246 to 250. This mix was sent in by Felipe. Alright, when we get past the first part of the intro that has that like recorder in it or whatever, things start to sound pretty good, but that intro part with the recorder, you've boosted a lot of high mids in both the acoustic guitar and the recorder, so not only are they fighting each other, so they're not really sitting well next to each other, but it's also starting to distort a little bit in the intro. Things sound pretty good overall. The couple things I'm noticing, the acoustic, it sounds like you really over EQ'd the acoustic, like you pushed the top end way too much, and that's making it kind of overpower everything else. I think this is another instance of you were trying to make it sit right in the mix, and so you went towards EQ for that, when really you probably should have just adjusted the fader. Other than that, you're missing a little bit of low end in the kick drum. Like, I wish we had a little bit more sub frequencies going on in the kick, but other than those couple things, it honestly sounds pretty good overall. See, this section here sounds really good because the acoustic's not playing like constantly over the whole thing, but the moments when the acoustic is playing, you can tell how much it's cutting through and taking over everything. Don't use EQ to boost the crap out of some frequencies when you could just adjust the fader volume instead. This mix was sent in by Derek. Another one where you definitely boosted the high end way too much. Like everything above like 1.5K is just boosted way too much. Things are starting to get really harsh and thin sounding because there's so much high end compared to the low end. Especially in that clean guitar and the cymbals, like there's way too much high end in those things. You gotta back the high end down a little bit and just adjust the fader instead. I mean, honestly, this sounds pretty solid except for the fact that you've boosted the high mids so much. I think you probably have a bunch of acoustic foam in your mixing space, but probably you don't have any other actual acoustic treatment. The problem with acoustic foam is it does absorb some high-end frequencies, but it does absolutely nothing for your low end. So if you have acoustic foam in there, it's going to absorb some of the high-end frequencies, but none of the low end. So in your space, the low end is going to sound overpowering to you, so you're going to boost the high end to compensate. I think that's probably what's happened with a lot of the tracks in the last week or so, because it seems to be a pretty consistent problem. Don't boost the high mids to the point that it gets painful. If you have only acoustic foam in your room, you'd honestly probably be better off tearing it down and mixing with no treatment whatsoever. You need to have full frequency absorption to actually treat your room. This mix was sent in by Gregory. Right away, you got way too much low end in pretty much everything, especially the bass and the kick. It's really overpowering. Bass sounds super muddy. The vocals sound pretty good, but just the overall amount of low end in the track is overpowering everything else. I have been living through the longest day. We come to. Alright, not only have you pushed the low end way too much, but there is like a gaping hole in your high end. Like you can even see it visibly here. It looks like you just took a massive cut at 5K that was like super wide and you just got this like huge notch taken out of the high end. The combination of way too much low end and too little high end is just making it sound super low end heavy. It's like you took all the high end attack out of the guitars and the bass. Like we still have a little in the drums, like really high up, and like the vocals in the 1 to 2K area, but like if you've been watching some of my previous critiques and I've been telling people they've been pushing the high end way too much, if that's what's made you do this, I apologize sincerely, but dude, you completely gutted the high end and boosted the lows way too much. Yeah, man, all this extra low end is almost definitely EQ that you did in the mix. Like, from what I'm hearing, all the source tones sound like they're probably okay. This mix was sent in by Adam. The intro sounded pretty good. I could have maybe used a little bit more low end in the guitar. Once everything else kicks in, it sounds like there's way too much reverb or delay on something. Like things are starting to sound really washy, and like there's definitely some time effect on here that is overpowering everything and just making everything sound kind of muddy and washy. And
we're living in the future now, with all the shiny tech and space age fancy. Wow, we're so happy to be here. No friends.
All right, the source tones don't sound too bad. Honestly, the mix isn't too bad either, but there's definitely not enough low end and there's definitely too much high end. Like the mix definitely sounds thin overall. It sounds like you boosted high end too much in everything. Vocals sound pretty decent. You asked about the snare sound. The snare, like everything else, sounds really thin. It definitely needs a lot more low end. It also sounds like it might be over compressed, and honestly, it should probably be turned up a little bit. It's a little too far in the background, at least compared to the cymbals. Again, boosting some low end in that might help. But honestly, the big thing that's going on is whatever time effect you have on here is just really overpowering everything. It's probably the drum reverb. It might even straight up be the room that the drums were recorded in, but it really sounds like you added some kind of a time effect to at least one element, if not multiple elements, and it's just really overpowering everything. This mix was sent in by Silas.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, go!
All right, I like the vibe of it, but there's a couple things I'm noticing here. You definitely boosted the high mids of the guitar too much. I could definitely use some more of the bass, probably overall bass volume, but also maybe add a little bit more low end into the bass guitar. The snare also definitely needs a little bit more bottom end. The kick sounds pretty good as far as like overall low end to high end. The vocals are starting to distort. If it's an intentional choice, that's fine, but it sounds more like you boosted the high mids too much in two different elements, and that's causing clipping. And also the guitar is definitely fighting with the lead vocal, so you got to find a way to get the guitar and the vocal to play better with each other. It sounds like you're really boosting like the exact same frequency range in both. You got to find different frequencies, like a different space for each of those to cut through. That'll not only make it sound cleaner and make the vocals more intelligible, but it'll also make it so that the guitar doesn't sound as harsh as it does, and it should get rid of that clipping problem.
Fill it up and watch it burn down.